You ready?
Go live. Good evening, everyone. My name is Bill Fisher, and I am the Fair Housing Officer for Columbia County. And I would like to just mention that Columbia County gives us the full support of fair housing. Each year in April, which is Fair Housing Month, the Columbia County Board of Supervisors presents a proclamation designating or proclaiming April as Fair Housing Month. And anything that we do in the Fair Housing Department has their full support. And this is the proclamation that they issue each year. I won't read it, but it does talk about all the protected classes and characteristics that are involved when it comes to fair housing and the equality in fair housing. So each year in March, I go down and I accept this from the County Board of Supervisors, and it is read to the whole board and anyone else that's in attendance. Usually we have some press people there. I'm just gonna, I usually like to talk, but for the sake of leaving something out, I'd like to read some of the phone calls or the types of phone calls that I get. And they would, and these are some, not certainly not resident to these. Lease terminations, termination of tenancy notices, reasonable accommodations, reasonable modifications, evictions, warrant of evictions, order to show cause, and rent increases. And that would involve what's going on in the city of Hudson now, where they have opted into the good cause eviction law that was set back in April of 74. 74, boy, I'm getting old. April of 2024. Okay, 10 days notice to cure. That would be to cure any kind of violation in the lease that a tenant may have. Right to privacy, which is also tied to what they call right to quiet enjoyment, to quiet enjoyment. Self-help, which I can explain when the Q&A comes up. Warranty of habitability and repairs, get a lot of those. The roommate law, we can explain a little about the roommate law. And then we have actually, I can give you the section of the real property law, but we can get into that a little later. But these are the kind of things that I deal with as the fair housing officer for Columbia County, and I like to do the best I can for those people that call. Also, landlords, they should be familiar with all of those things as well. And so I was hoping that we might have some landlords here tonight too. But so when we get in, when the others have finished their speaking, and we get into the Q&A, I'll be happy to answer any questions on these things, and I'll go through them again. Lease terminations, terminations of tenancy, reasonable accommodations and reasonable modifications, evictions, warrant of eviction, order to show cause, rent increases, good cause eviction, 10 days notice to cure, right to privacy, which goes along with the right to quiet enjoyment, self-help, and the warranty of habitability, and the roommate law, the question of roommate. So that covers pretty much a lot of the calls that I get. I'll be happy to go into detail on any of those that you might be interested in. when we call for the questions and answers. Thank you.
So I guess we could just maybe go right down the line with the presenters, if that's
No
okay.
formal.
Okay, hi, my name is Nick Fox. I'm the Chief Code Enforcement Officer for the City of Hudson. Our office is here to ensure community safety. I wanted to stress that all tenants have the right to the safe and healthy living conditions. Reasons that tenants might need to contact our office is if the landlord is refusing to repair or isn't able to repair after multiple communications. Heat, if you're having heating issues, heat should be coming on October 1st and should be going off around May 31st. And he should be providing you with 68, a minimum of 68 degrees of heat. Hot water should be maintained at 110 degrees. If you have any electrical hazards, you have any issues with your smoke detectors, any pest infestations, plumbing failures, structural concerns, roof leaks, these are the reasons you're gonna kind of want to call us. But again, that's after you make contact with the landlord. We shouldn't be your first point of contact. We should be your last point of contact when you can't get through to them. We're also, neutral in a sense where we also hear out the landlord if the tenants are providing sanitary housing conditions or they're over cluttering the house, where they're putting themselves or any of the neighbors or anything like that at risk of making a safe egress in the event of an emergency. Or if first responders have to enter your home, they should be able to do so safely and get to you safely and easily also, or anybody that's needs help in that house. And also if they're causing risks to their own life or health, like constantly removing smoke detector batteries or anything like that. Yeah, contact us. We'll see what we can do to help you out or take other means if we have to.
So just a quick little bit of background, and what we're probably should have gone over this, but we're gonna go down the row. Everybody's gonna have 10 minutes or so, 10, 15 minutes to talk, and then we're gonna do a question and answer section at the very end. For anybody who's on Zoom or in the audience tonight.
Okay.
So. You good?
I'm done.
I guess I'm next. Well, I'm late to start, but my name's Robert Romaker. I'm a managing attorney at the Legal Aid Society. Based in Albany, but we do cover Columbia Green with most of our grants. I'm a supervisor of the housing unit and we do cover Columbia Green with our housing grants. I don't have anything prepared. He's got all these nice notes and everything. I'm all jealous and stuff. But basically, the one thing that I want to make sure that I say is that we've got a lawyer who has intake slots for Columbia Green for people who are getting evicted, and we don't hardly ever fill her slots. Like on Thursday, we tell our support staff, okay, you can fill it with Rensselaer, Schenectady, and Albany if you don't have any Columbia Green. And I see the chart, I look at it every day, and she doesn't get very many intakes from Columbia Green. So I would just say, if you are getting evicted or you know anybody who's getting evicted who wants a lawyer or at least advice, that they should call us. I've got our toll-free number here. It's 833-628-0087. The way that our intake system works is, if someone calls up and they're eligible for one of our grants, and there's not a conflict of interest, because we're lawyers, so we have to, do our ethical duty to check that, then they will get assigned to an attorney or a paralegal in that special grant. And in my instance, my frame of reference is housing. And if you're, you've got a landlord who is evicting you and you're in court, especially, you can call our income limits for the grant that we have now, which we're applying for the same funding. It's gonna have a different name, but it's 80% of AMI, which is high. We used to have go under step, which I know that your agency has, and it was like a family of four could make up to 35 grand a year, which is not that many people. Now I think a family of four could get under this grant can make up to, I think it's 90, like 90 grand a year. So we're really for low and moderate income persons, because we've got families and households that, you know, can make 60, 70, 80 grand a year and still get our help. So I wanted to emphasize that. We only, since we have such limited slots, because we have 3 lawyers to cover 5 counties. The Albany, Rensselaer, Schenectady counties are extremely busy, so we have very limited slots. What happens if somebody calls up and there's not a slot available, or they're not in court yet, they've just got an eviction notice or something? We have 2 lawyers and a paralegal that all they do all day, every day, is they do advice calls. We open the case. They have a call every hour, so like 9, 10, 11, all the way through the day. They open the case, they talk to the person, they give them advice, and then they close the case. It's an open and shut thing like the same day. Once in a while, they'll, you know, call the landlord or call DSS or something like that. But mostly it's just advice, and then it's closed, and they say, you get sort of court papers, call back. But we aren't getting very many, you know, the lawyer that I have for Columbia Green, she just got licensed 3 months ago, so I won't let her go to court alone, so I go with her, I'm her supervisor. And I haven't been down here much at all, so we just aren't getting the calls, so people should call. And with the advice only, that can be really just about anything that we do. We don't do any criminal cases. Yeah. But pretty much any kind of civil issue that's within what we do, like a consumer issue or landlord tenant issue, or other kind of issues that are civil. With 2 lawyers and a paralegal, that's, you know, I don't know how many slots they have each day, but I think 7 or 8, so that's, you know, 20 to 20 plus slots every day of people that are giving advice. We had to limit our intake to for housing, just for people who are in court or later, because we were having people that just have an eviction notice before court, and they were getting the precious slots that we have for our grant. And then people were calling that were in court or had the sheriff had served them with the warrant, and we don't have any slots for them. So we're trying to limit with our limited intake slots, we're trying to narrow that down to the people who need our help the most until we hire more lawyers. And we're on the verge of possibly picking up another lawyer too, so then we'll be have more capacity to handle more cases. We also have, we have a lot of different units that in different areas that we handle. We have a tax clinic, a low income taxpayer clinic, so if people have issues with the IRS, we help with that. We have a disability unit that has numerous lawyers that help people appeal like SSI and SSD denials, and I think they do terminations too. I have to be careful because we have some grants for some counties, but not others. And I know the housing stuff and I don't know all the other ones, so, because I know we have like senior legal services grants that are just for seniors. I don't think we have it down here. I think somebody else does. We have it in other counties. I know Albany and Rensselaer for sure. But basically, if you or somebody you know has a civil legal problem, they can't afford to hire a lawyer on their own, then they should call us. And with housing, I mean, but largely what we do is we defend evictions. That's 90% of what we do. If people are getting their Section 8 voucher terminated, that's something else that we would look at and possibly handle. Because we do have a couple of paralegals that can do that kind of work. If people are denied assistance by DSS, that's something that we can help with. So pretty much any kind of issue, and then clearly people that are in court. And they're with an eviction, they can't afford to hire somebody, they should call us because we have a lawyer there and we're getting calls. I think that's pretty much it. I was gonna talk a little bit about the law and stuff like that, but I've got 10 minutes and I'm probably close to that now with my rambling, so I'll stop there.
You can keep going because the judge, and the judge is not here who would have went over that stuff, so.
Well, I mean, I mean, the main things I was gonna hit on is in 2019, it seemed like a long time ago, but considering the courts were closed during COVID for evictions from like, what, 2020, 21, 22. It's 7 years ago, but in this context, it's like 3 or 4 years ago. They made a whole bunch of changes to the eviction process. And I think a lot of it is in recognition that there's an affordable housing crisis. Because, wages are going like this and rents are going like this and people can't afford, a lot of people can't afford live places. So I think that they kind of stretched out the process to make it, I don't know if I wanna say more difficult to evict people, but I think it's a more fair process for tenants. It used to be that when you wanna start an eviction for non-payment of rent, you have to give 3 days notice, now that's 14 days notice. When you would get served with papers, the court proceeding would be 5 to 12 days after that, now it's 10 to 17 days. If you go to court, you can automatically get an adjournment for 14 days, a postponement. Just by asking for it, at least this is all saying what the law is. It's always only as good as the judge that is there to enforce it, so. Does it always happen this way? It's the way it's supposed to happen. And then on the back end, if you lose and there's a warrant and the sheriff serves it, it used to be 72 hours, they would come back and evict you, now it's 14 days. It used to be 72 hours excluding weekends, now it's 14 days including weekends, so there's it's a longer process. It also, in places that haven't opted into good cause eviction, and I'll talk about that a little bit, because that's really the biggest development. It used to be if you have a month-to-month tenancy, you don't have a lease, you just give somebody 30 days notice and they're gone. Now, it's like a gradual process. If you've been there for less than a year, you get 30 days notice. If you've been there for between 1 and 2 years, you get 60 days notice. And if you've been there for more than 2 years, you get 90 days notice. And I think that along with good cause eviction, I think is not just to kind of level the playing field for tenants, but I think there's an aspect of it. And I don't have any empirical proof, it's kind of an opinion of mine. And I think it's true, it's that I think that the local and state legislators are trying to stabilize neighborhoods. And if you've got people that are, if you've got tenants coming in and going out and going, there's, it's not a stable neighborhood. I think that's part of what the goal is here. So those are some of the changes that the good cause law basically says that you can't have those. You can't just not renew someone's lease or evict them at the end of their lease, or if on a month lease. For no reason at all, which is what the law has been. You can't, you can do it for a good reason, you can do it for no reason, you can't do it for a bad reason, like discrimination, retaliation, those kind of things. But now, and the way the state law was set up, that you have good cause eviction in New York City and upstate and any municipality that opts into it. And City of Hudson has opted into it. Catskill has opted into it, Albany has opted into it, Troy just opted into it, which is really one of the biggest surprises. Because it's a very landlord friendly place. So, and what that means is basically that you can't evict somebody unless you have a good reason to do so. Of course, if you allege that somebody is, breaching their lease, you can do it. If you get alleged that obviously non-payment of rent, you can do it. So there are lots of exceptions, but you can't just say, this person made me mad one day, I just want him gone. There has to be some good cause, there has to be a reason that you can prove in court if necessary to evict somebody. And like I said, it's been great for us so far in the places that it's happened. I mean, I think that the learning curve on it is probably, still developing, and judges and, you have judges that come on the bench and go off the bench, and lawyers and stuff that are kind of learning how it works. But the other thing that hasn't really come to the surface yet is a right to counsel in eviction cases. Which, would be like if you're like in criminal cases, you're assigned to a public defender. or or an assigned counsel, if you're income eligible, that would be the same thing, but for eviction cases. They have that in most of New York City, but it has not come upstate yet. Don't know if it will or not, but that's something else that's a development that we monitor. And it would be great, because I mean, people get evicted from their homes. It really does a lot to children and their education, and it tears families apart. And there's a lot of bad things that happen when people get evicted, and so I think that, obviously I'm a tenant advocate at legal aid, so I think this, but that, the more protections that can be put in, the better it will be for a lot of families and including a lot of children. And there's, there have been studies and stuff and books about this. So there's, exciting things are happening. And I think that's pretty much it. Refer people to our office and have them call. And, hopefully we'll be able to help them. Well, I'm done.
Thank you, Matt.
I guess I'm at next.
It would appear that way.
Yes. My name is Kirk Neller, and I'm happy to be here. I was invited to talk about insurance, both from a tenant standpoint as well as a landlord standpoint. I think I'll skip the policy forms and endorsements, because we all are familiar with those, especially those that have got their own homeowners policies. It's advisable, obviously, to have the best policy form that you can have, an all risk policy, or what they call an HO3. It's gonna be the most comprehensive. And quite frankly, the difference between it and the next level down is about $30 or $40 a year. So it just simply doesn't make any sense for a landlord to purchase a policy that has got inferior coverage, because you never know when you're gonna need it. The few things that I'd like to talk about today, the first is just the cost to rebuild. We've got a building inspector here, and he can tell you probably better than anybody that it's no longer a $250 per square foot process. It's probably right now not a $300 process per square foot to rebuild, and it's an issue. After COVID, we saw a huge increase in the labor cost and the material costs. And especially with these older buildings in your cities, Hudson being why we're here, but you mentioned Troy and Catskill and Albany. These brick buildings, the cost have skyrocketed. And for instance, if you've got a building, let's say it's a 2,500 square foot building, and you've got say $750,000 coverage on it. That's not enough, because it's probably gonna cost you about $800 a square foot to rebuild that building. Well, doing some quick math in my head, that's just a little bit under $2 million of coverage. Well, I've been in this business for 42 years, and I can tell you right now, I remember on Warren Street insuring Twin Fish, remember Myron Cohen, Twin Fish's building. Good old Myron. And, I only paid 50,000 for the building, and that's all I want on it. Well, back then, you couldn't argue with them, because the rents were too low. There just wasn't a lot of commerce going on in the city of Hudson. Now, that same building, I've seen the progression from the $50,000 or $75,000 of coverage on that building to maybe like the $2 to $2.5 million, because the new landlords have acknowledged what the true rebuilding costs are. So you say, well, what's the difference? Why can't I just insure it for what I have in it if I own it? Well, you can do pretty much whatever you want. But the real issue is if you don't have, if you're insured, the value of your policy is not to within 80 or 90% of its replacement cost. And it depends upon the insurance company that you're with. If you have a partial loss, you are gonna get a severe penalty because you're not insured to value. So to give you an example of a kind of a simple example would be if you had a building and you should have $1 million of coverage on it, but all you have is the $500,000, $500,000 of coverage. If you have a tenant that has a kitchen fire. The building inspector is gonna come in and he's gonna say, oh, time out, you're gonna have all your tenants vacate the building. They're gonna shut the electric down. And your insurance adjuster is gonna come in and say, okay, what did you have? Well, I had $500,000 of coverage. What should you have had? And they calculate based upon local building codes, $1 million of coverage. So they take what you did have, divide it by what you should have had. And get a percentage. Well, that's 50%, right? 500 divided by 1 million, 50%. Well, the co-insurance clause, as I said before, is either 80 or 90%, which means that you should have had either $800,000 or $900,000 of coverage on that $1 million replacement to get 100% of the loss. So if that kitchen fire, the fire for everything, the cost to reclaim that loss is $200,000. Any insurance company is gonna say, well, you were within 50% of the replacement value. Therefore, on a partial loss, you're gonna get 50%. So instead of getting 200,000, you're gonna get $100,000. So 100,000 is gonna come out of your pocket. And this has been a huge issue for us because, we've had policies for years and years and years, and money's tight. And when we tell people it's gonna cost you $300 or $400 a square foot or more, depending upon the style of building, to rebuild, they just don't wanna pay the additional premium. So my advice, check the policy, move your deductibles up maybe to save some money. But you really need to be within at least that 80% co-insurance margin. Or else you're gonna suffer a big financial loss from a landlord standpoint. The other item that we're seeing a lot in the city is Hudson being an old city. You've got bad connections at the water mains. You got the heavy trucks, creating a lot of vibration. And the water mains separate from your inlets going into your buildings. Well, that's not covered under any policy of insurance unless you add utility line coverage. And we see this time and time again. It's a simple policy or a simple endorsement to your policy. Typically costs you $75 and you're gonna get $10,000 or $20,000 in coverage. If all of a sudden, you start seeing some water running into your basement, or the city realizes, the DPW says, I think we got a problem here, because we got a few leakers. Well, I owned a building in Chatham where we were, the water was, our bill was staying the same, but the village knew that there was a leak and it was out at the street. And it turned out that was where the main water main fed 3 buildings. They lost an enormous amount of money. Thank God it was their responsibility. They paid to have all the repairs done. But I can tell you, we've paid a pile of claims in this city because of that. The other let's stay on the water line. Sewer backups in your buildings. Again, Hudson's built on a hill. Where's water run? Comes downhill. Where's it run into? The Hudson River. Well, guess what? When we have these huge, 2-inch-an-hour rains, I don't care that this is an old drainage system. It's simply, even the new drainage systems can't handle the amount of water that's trying to fit through those pipes. And when it hits the Hudson is expanding, not contracting, so it can't accept that water. Then where's it gonna go? Well, if you're the unlucky person to have a building that has a floor drain in the basement, it's gonna bubble right up and it's gonna ruin your basement. And God forbid, if you have, a finished basement or a lot of utilities. Flood is not covered unless you have flood policy. Most people do not carry the flood policy. What you can buy is an endorsement to the policy again. Depending upon the company, $50 or $100 for backup of sewers and drains. And, God forbid, it's a sewer backing up because of this, and then you've got the health department involved, and it's just a nasty nasty situation for a landlord. So a couple of little things that you can add to your policies that I'm sure will make the city of Hutchin or any city very, very happy, because you're gonna get the repair quicker and tenants are gonna be a lot happier because they can get back into the building or just use the building. Because if you can't flush the toilet, that's not a good situation. That's, there are a couple of the key points regarding landlord type coverage. The other one that I'd like to make is loss of rents. People don't understand, building owners don't understand, and this also does apply to tenants. If there's a loss and you have to live elsewhere, you need to have, if you're a landlord, loss of rents coverage. If you're a tenant, you need additional living expense. And what that means is that your policy will pay you to live elsewhere until the damage has been complete. I can't stress enough, with a rising cost of rents, usually people, owners don't have enough loss of rent coverage, and probably tenants don't have enough additional living expense. Again, it's nickels on the dollar when you're looking at the overall premium. Just a couple of things that underwriting considerations, which probably would go in line with the building inspector, wood stoves. Don't like wood stoves. They're just bad news. Same thing with fireplaces. Excessive number of animals. Tenants, they can have a dog maybe or a cat. Business exposures. One of these things that we see quite often is work from home. Well, that's a business exposure. And if you're a tenant, you better have that coverage on your tenant homeowners policy. And lastly, I'll just hit this briefly because I'm probably way over my time. You're looking, you're timing me over here. I see that.
It's an Apple Watch. It's notifications. Anything happens in the whole world, it comes on my watch, so it's not timing, it goes as long as you want.
But tenants,
Your insurance company.
Yeah, actually,
Yeah.
wanting me to pay more premium. I think.
that's right. Well, you got a non-renewal.
Trying to reach you.
But,
but-
The one thing about tenants insurance, we always get the question, especially with younger people. They're unlimited income and it's, I can't afford tenants insurance. Well, can you afford a couple $100s a year? Well, yes. I said, well, that's what's gonna cost you. And believe me, if there's a loss, you can't, for a couple of $100, for an extra cup of coffee a day, or a couple packs of cigarettes, or whatever your pleasures are, you know what? That's good, sound peace of mind to have, in your back pocket should you have a loss. It's interesting that, that the tenants, they just, when they hear that a $20,000 of contents coverage with 300,000 limits of liability is gonna cost them $240, they just, oh. And here's the dirty little secret. If they have a car, which most do, you get a coupler discount, and the discount on your automobile insurance literally will give you your tenant's policy for free. So, it really is not costing them anything. And it's probably gonna, because car insurance is so called darn high, it's probably gonna save you money, give you a free policy plus save you money in the long run. The one thing that I also want to bring up, and I'm glad the attorney's not here, is we have landlords that ask the tenant to list them as an additional insured on their tenant policy. It can't be done. If it's a business policy, with a mercantile down below, then you can list a commercial entity as an additional insured party on a commercial policy. It's a blanket request that attorneys will ask individual personal tenants. And I get this question so often. If you look at any insuring agreement for a tenant homeowner policy, and you look at the definition of a named insured, which if you're an additional insured, it's gotta conform to the definition of the named insured. What is it? It's the named insured Dominic Moranti, his wife, his children, or his immediate relatives. That's all that's gonna be included in that definition of a named insured, period, end of story. Well, if, Phil Gellert, if you're on this policy, this is for you, baby. You know, if it's an LLC that they wanna add, it can't be added. Because it's considered by law a foreign entity, and that will not respond. So what you just need to do is say, hey, give me a copy of your tenant homeowners policy. Make sure that you have the insurance, update it at the annual renewal of their lease agreement. And that's sufficient, so that at least the landlord knows they've got coverage, the tenant knows that they're gonna be insured. Now, a business, like any of the mercantile businesses on Warren Street, the definition of a named insured there is a commercial entity. So you can add that landlord, if the landlord owns a building individually or based upon an LLC. So not to get too wordy here, but it's something that we get, my offices constantly are being requested to have this, and it just simply, I mean, even if a company does it, it adds them. They're not gonna respond, so it's not worth the paper that they're written on, and I've seen it happen. So go on record for that. Other than that, that's all I have. Be happy to answer any questions. Fortunately, pricing, as I've already indicated on the tenants policies, they've been flat. And quite frankly, on the landlord and the business owner policies, for the mixed use has been very, very, reasonable. And by the way, there's plenty of goods. I brought a lot of swag over here, so please help yourself. We've even got cucumber seeds, so you'll have plenty of good cucumber. That's all I got.
I'll say that somebody broke into my apartment when I was in college, and I was really glad my father had tenants insurance, because it took a bunch of my electrical stuff and we were able to get it, and so I had it since then, because my dad had the foresight to have it. But it was the landlord, the landlord did it because it was a key entry, there was no sign of forced entry, so. Anyway, so there's your plug for tenants insurance, it helped me a lot, so I didn't get my stuff replaced and not have to spend out of pocket on it.
Also, if I may give them a plug, we have some stories related to what we talked about. As far as like building fires, fire started in the kitchen, everybody knows Wonder Bar, that place went down. Underinsured, Wonder Bar's not around anymore, right? Also, the city mains breaking, I've only been here a couple of months and I've already seen that story happen a couple times. Where people's basements get flooded out, their furnaces, their hot water heaters. And anything else they have down in that basement is gone, and if they didn't have insurance on it, if they didn't have the flood insurance or whatever, then. That's on them to make them repairs.
I had
True stories.
I had an attorney over, by the court, the courthouse now, I can't remember where everything is, change around. But, he had all this valuable papers and records, and they just got soiled. Unfortunately, we had the valuable papers and records coverage, and, he was brought home, it's like $40,000. Now you think a life's worth of work,
Kurt, if I have renter's insurance and my personal property gets damaged by a leak or something that's caused by the owner or landlord, can my renter's insurance carrier go against his insurance company?
it can do, let's call it a subrogation claim. And it might be able to, one of the classics is, I remember Jimmy DiStefano, when he owned all the buildings here. The first person to have a 7-figure sale in Hudson, let me tell you, when he sold the 4 properties that were across from the 7th Street Park. He had a hot water heater burst in one of the apartments and flooded down below. The tenant's insurance paid, and they tried to go after him, and he doesn't know when a hot water heater is gonna let loose. So if it's something like that, then it's just simple wear and tear that caused it. But if there was a situation where a tenant had said, hey, I got a leaky pipe here, it looks like the thing is gonna burst, and he didn't do anything, to your point about getting those pit things fixed, then absolutely that tenant's policy is gonna pay. You're made whole, and then they're gonna go back to a segregation
Segregated.
building them, yeah. This is riveting stuff, isn't it?
Oh.
I'm telling you. Guaranteed to put you to sleep if you have a problem.
Did you want me to go, Tricia?
Yes, sir.
Who are you?
I'm no, you got my insurance policy, what do you think? You just made my name, oh, my 5 kids, but I don't. So my name is Dominic Parenti, I'm the program coordinator for the Independent Living Center, and I also am the chairperson for the Hatchery Advisory Board. Just a quick note to Kurt's story is that 3 years ago, I purchased a camper and on a site in Chatham. And the camper, I paid it off and I got regular insurance on the camper. Now it was $25 a month, I think, ended up being, the second year. A tree landed on the camper, $3,500 damage. Insurance paid $3,000 of that. You don't, again, you don't know who we think to put on the RV, but if I didn't have that. I still have the camper now, it was fixed, luckily damages, and so that's what with Kurt saying, the amount, it makes you feel better. When something happens, because you're covered, and it gives you ease of mind. And it is very cheap, especially if you're just accustomed to your need. So, but, well, back to me. So I sit on the Housing Advisory Board, I'm the chairperson, and I work closely with Bill Fisher and an amazing board. But my program coordinator position with housing, I mainly deal with regional accommodation calls, which means that someone has a disability and the landlord is maybe giving them a hard time, and what that process is. And also I assist people with a listing of housing, will help them sign up for Section 8 when it becomes available. So in terms of, even though we serve people with disabilities on one part of it, make sure their rights, making sure that they have the integration that they want to need in life and all that, but we also serve anyone with housing issues, and trying to accommodate what we can do, how we can do it. It's very important, what Nick Fox was saying, that my thing is, make sure you document everything. So when Nick's coming to your door, everything's there, right? Every request, anything, if the key thing that Kurt and Nick were talking about is documenting it from the beginning. And document when it happens, because like Kurt said, if you document to your landlord, they did nothing, and now you have that paper. That they didn't anything, and now you have a problem. So in terms of reasonable accommodation. There's rules and regulation that, some ownership comes on to the tenant of what they have to provide. And some definitely comes under the landlord, especially if there's tax incentives or HUD or something comes onto the landlord to provide the accommodation. And it's the idea of one, knowing your rights, knowing how to do it if you have to go to DHR, Department of Human Rights, or how to put it in wordage that will make your protected, with any accommodations that's needed. Another key thing is, especially when it comes to the housing, is making sure you are not discriminated against. And so, and I look, one thing that pops up sometimes is the service dog, pet house. So there's two things. A service dog definitely cannot be, you cannot discriminate if someone has service dog, and they can't charge a pet dog. Emotional support dog, same thing. In front of housing, they can't discriminate if you have an emotional support, but they can charge you responsible for that pet. Or because it's still considered a pet, even though it's emotional support. It's not a service animal according to the ADA in terms of what it happens, for housing or for other reasons. There's a definitely
distinction between those two things when it comes to then housing, when it comes to going into stores, when it comes to, there's definitely a difference in that regard. And there is, unfortunately, emotional support dogs, right? They serve a purpose. But unfortunately that, the training for emotional support dog is not as intense as a service dog. Service dog is trained to ignore other people, just be there for the handler. They're not a pet. If you have anyone that has a service dog, they tell you, don't pet anyone. He's here to do a job. And that's the difference between the service dog and social is the training behind, they're not aggressive. They're trained to lay there, they're not a nuisance, so that there's definitely difference between those two dog situations. Another thing, we have other, in our agency, we with seniors, we have New York Connects. If someone's in housing, if someone's in a nursing home, someone's in a hospital, they're ready to come home. We have someone that will assist in making sure that your house is ready, whatever you need. We have a loan closet for medical equipment. Someone might need a walker, someone, to come out of the hospital. They might need something, whether permanent or temporary. We have a medical closet that can assist that person to get into their house. So there's really a lot of things that Independent Living Center does. But the housing right now is, I get calls, from, we cover plenty of big counties. So I get calls from both counties and they're totally different in terms of how people respond. And Bob, I'm definitely gonna, because I get calls, and now that I know that, there's a hierarchy, I want to explain that to people that, because sometimes they say, well, I called and they don't get back, right? So, but it's also when you call, how often you call, and I don't know, Bob, it's hard at the 11th hour to call someone with needing help from legal aid, right? The sooner the better you need it.
You know, sure you're asking, but I mean, people can call at any part of the.
No, I'm saying most of the time I get it when they're being evicted. And it's at the 11th hour, they're going to court tomorrow. Right?
But there's still things that we can do now, well, actually, even if the sheriff's at their door, we've had people who've been evicted who were able, in limited cases, to get back in, so it's really never too late. The only time it's maybe too late, probably too late, is if they get evicted and then the landlord moves something else in. Because we're not gonna be able to we're not gonna convince a judge to let our people back in and kick these people out that just ain't good. But other than that, it's pretty wide open. We have a lot of people that call, and I know people complain, sometimes people have to sit on hold for quite a while. We always tell people, call as close to 9 AM as you can, because we've got 5 counties of people with all kind of problems that are calling in. And, we don't charge anything, so I tell people, you put a sign out in front that says free lawyers, and they call, and they call, and they call, because lawyers are expensive, so.
And now you also have someone in office for aging right now too, is that a new person in there?
I don't know that we covered that here, and again, that's not my bailiwick, I know we covered it in Albany County and Rensselaer County.
Well, they used to have an attorney there, and I thought at one point Legal Aid was gonna cover that.
Yeah, I
That's
think
it.
there was some discussion about that, but I think there's an attorney there, but I think that person's not affiliated with us.
Okay, good.
I
good.
just heard recently that she's not there anymore and that they were gonna be potentially partnering with Legal Aid.
Okay,
But-
yeah, that might be happening,
Where's
that doesn't come across my desk, so
Gotcha.
I'm not sure about it.
So it wouldn't be the same attorneys that deal with your regular caseload, would it be someone separate from Legal Aid, do you think, or you're not sure at all?
No, if they're partnering with us, it would be, we have 2 lawyers that we just hired not that long ago, that do senior legal services, so it's like anything that involves seniors, as long as it's a civil issue, we do criminal stuff. But, housing, consumer, wills, living wills, family, all that, everything. There's a lot of housing in those grades too, because when cases get kind of complicated, they can't come over to us. So I know.
So it's one last point is that the city of Hudson has a grant, access to home grant, And that's what, that means someone who is renting or has a home. And they need some kind of modification to stay in your home. So if you need that application, you can contact Michelle Tulo at the City of Hudson. What that does is if you need a ramp, or if you need either bathroom, access and make it accessible, you need to stay in home. There's money out there, to assist you, into making that renovation, through the grant.
And, Dominic, I also know that Habitat for Humanities, they have a program, it's not specific to that in particular, but if older, not just older people, but if anybody needs work on their housing to accommodate, whether it be weatherization, things like that, it's a really great program. And it's not utilized that much at all. The other thing you're talking about, medical issues that people may have. I just found this out because we insure a number of the fire departments and rescue squads around. And I believe it's Greenpoint has a program now where they have all of the durable medical equipment. So if somebody, so let's say, is being discharged from the hospital and they need a walker, or they need a thing for their toilet, or they need crutches or a wheelchair, they have them and will actually let them, they'll deliver them to the house so they don't have to, have to spend, because a lot of the insurance policies don't offer the full coverage for the durable medical equipment, or there's a limited amount. And they are stockpiling a lot of stuff, and I think they're one of the first EMSs in the area. And for somebody, like, I don't know about you, but I know for my family, we've got like 3 sets of crutches that the kids have gotten, and they just sit in a corner. We're never gonna use them again. Why not let other people use them so they don't have to pay a couple of $100 for them? And so you can donate to them and then they put them back out in the county. Our EMS service, I know this is off topic, but it's one of the best in the state here in Columbia County. They do an amazing job.
Is that Greenport Rescue Squad you're referring to?
Yeah.
So that's where people can donate and that's where people can get the,
It's, you know what, I'm having a mental block. I'm almost positive it's Greenport, but it may be Velation, but I'm pretty
I
sure.
think it's Felicia.
Is it Velation?
Which
Okay,
has,
stand corrected on that, yeah.
thank you for that.
but there's some churches, I probably at least once or twice a month on Facebook, I see someone looking for medical equipment.
Yeah.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
so either
Big problem.
walkers, wheelchairs, so I jump on that, I jump on that.
Sleep machines for people to sleep at, the sleep apnea.
I don't know,
Because
probably.
Well, they would have
Those
to
are-
adjust it to the knee, but they're essential. Yeah, absolutely. They would have to be recalibrated, but in terms of our loan closet, we had somebody donate, I think, two recliners, automatic recliners.
Yeah, big deal.
They're going already. Yeah, sure. Of the knee. They're going.
The ambulating recliners, the
Yeah.
ones that up and down.
You're right out.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yes, we had
Yeah.
three of them. They're all gone
So it's,
because the knee, and they're very expensive.
Ooh, yes, they are.
And they're in great shape, and so that's another thing is to, is have the availability of something. We also have it off in Troy that has some equipment. Like Kirk said, it is very expensive. And it's also, I'll tell you a story, we had on Facebook, we had someone needing a wheelchair to be helped into their car from a local restaurant.
Like immediately.
Immediately. So I saw it, contacted them, within 10 minutes, Joe brought the wheelchair, and we said,
that had to feel good, right?
Oh, yeah, it was awesome.
right,
It was a Friday too. It was like the end of the day. It was like, this weekend's gonna rock.
yeah. So those are the things that, again, with having these extra things and also having the insurance policy, what Nick was talking about, preparation, I tell somebody with reasonable accommodations, right? That, was this issue there, or was it not there when you came in? The more you document, the better it is, because sometimes housing if you need a, grab bar. Some showers already have that ready to do for the need, right? When they make showers, they put they put the studs and everything in a certain level, so when the need arises, it's there. So that's another thing to do is, investigate that in terms of what does it look like to make this modification. It might not be expensive, because of the nature of, just attaching some studs. So, but I do want to, thank, this is our first time on Zoom, and I think it's great because now we could show this, but YouTube share it, for some people, so the information's there from Bob's and, information. Kurt's information and the importance of the information we have here. I think it's great, and I do want to thank our court, and I'll hand it back over to Mr. Bell.
Can I open up for questions, now, Bill?
I noticed a couple of the ladies. I'm not saying you're tardy, don't get me wrong, but.
I think he is. I think he is saying.
I want to give you the benefit of my opening remark anyway. And then I do have a question for Dominic that I'd like to ask him, but one of the things I get a lot of times is the lack of the return of the security deposit, or the security deposit comes back and it's not for the full amount that the individual paid. And I would like you to know, for you to get into a situation like that the landlord has to return that security deposit within 14 days. Within 14 days, and it has to be accompanied by receipts of the work that had to be done that did deplete from that security deposit. Not an itemized list, oh, this is what we gotta do. They have to show receipts. The landlord has to show receipts as to why it wasn't returned fully, and what they deducted from that security deposit. The other thing is that if you don't get the security deposit back within 14 days, or you don't get back some of the security deposit back after those receipts are documented and given to you, then what happens there is the landlord forfeits that security deposit, the whole amount. And if it can be proven in court that he did this willingly or blatantly or whatever, you can sue for more and possibly get up to twice the security deposit. So I think that's important for renters to know, because I do get a lot of calls, well, where's my security deposit? It didn't come in, or I got this itemized list. I had a case where a woman paid $1,650 in security deposit. She moved out. The landlord gave her back $200. And with an itemized list, that's not sufficient. That has to be receipts of the actual work done. So that's one thing, and Mr. Romaker, Attorney Romaker did allude to that law of 2019, and that it gives the tenants a lot more protection. And along with that same law, the length of tenancy has a notice of tenancy has to be actually compliant with the term of residency. If you live there less than a year, the termination of tenancy can be 30 days. If it's 2 years, or if it's over a year, it can be 60 days. And if it's 2 years or more, it can be 90 days. And I get an awful lot of people saying that I got a text message, I had to be out within 6 weeks. And the person's been living there for 15 years. But the property's been sold, And this landlord wants to naturally get more rent. So they want to get that tenant out. And so I get an awful lot of cases where these individuals don't get proper notice. Now, the 14-day notice, and maybe Mr. Attorney Romaker can tell me a little bit on this, but I get a lot of people who get a 14-day notice for non-payment of rent, but they never got a 5-day notice. Do you have any information on that, Lon?
Yeah, I didn't mention that when I went through the changes, the 5-day notice is. It's odd because. With the 14-day notice, the 14 days have to pass after the notice. With the 5-day notice, the 5 days have to pass before the notice, so it can be confusing. In other words, it's just something that has to be sent by the landlord by certified mail after the rent is 5 days late, so if it's. Due the first in the lease, and it's not there by the 5th, on the 6th or after, they're supposed to give a notice that says, hey. By the way, I know you're busy, but you didn't pay your rent this month, and it has to go by certified mail. And then they can do the 14-day at any point after that. A lot of times the 5-day doesn't happen. It's new.
But if a tenant went to court and said, I got a 14-day notice, my question is to that tenant, did you ever get a 5-day notice by certified mail? And they say no. In many cases, they don't get it. What would that do for the tenant as part of a defense in court?
It is a defense in court, but it's strange. Some defenses you can have where in certain circumstances, you can just go to the judge and go there. If you can't work out an agreement with your landlord, and you can just say, I want to dismiss the case because I want you to dismiss the case because of. That is not that. That is the landlord, if it goes to trial, the landlord has to prove that they served all the notices that are required. And one of them is that 5-day notice, and if you go through and they have their witness and they say, we did this and this and this, and they don't prove that 5-day notice, at that point. You can say you want it to be dismissed because they didn't prove that they served the 5-day notice. But again, the law is only as good, just in really all contexts, right? The law, when you get pulled over by a police officer, the law is only as good as the police officer that's standing there. When you go to court, the law is only as good as the judge is willing to enforce it. One of the first things I learned when I got out of law school, I was in Southern Ohio in the middle of nowhere, and I had a great case and I had it right there. It didn't matter. The judge didn't care. He wanted, this is what the outcome was gonna be, and the law didn't make any difference. And people do not realize that. People think, oh, they can't do that. It's the law. I'm like, people rob banks, they murder people violate the law all the time. And, I joke around and say, hey, I wanna drive 90 miles an hour down Central Avenue in Albany because some of these landlords are going to court and the law is just ignored, so maybe I could just do whatever I want to. Of course, I wouldn't do that, and I wouldn't be able to do that, but, there are the way things should go, the way, but what the law says, and there are the way things that sometimes they do go, and sometimes they don't go, and when you get down here and you get into town and village courts, and I don't mean to insult anybody personally or anything, but you've got people who are judges who aren't lawyers. And so they don't know the law, and then you try to make a legal argument to them as an attorney going down there, I got this legal argument, I learned this, I read this, and then they look at you like like you got 4 heads, I don't know what the hell you're talking
Well,
about.
I'm not so sure that, I think you're right there, Bob, because I think there's a lot of judges that may not know these things, and it's not fair to the tenant. And in cases like that, I will usually, not only in cases like that, but I'll get cases where people say they went to court and I said, well, did you tell them that you have a disabled child in a school district? And if that child is moved, it's gonna be detrimental to their mental state or health or whatever. And you have a disability yourself, and to try to get a justice of the peace or a judge to give more time. And then when they come out of court, I said, did you tell the judge all that? And they said, I didn't have the opportunity.
Right, well, it used to be that didn't matter, that was another change with well, new law in 2019 is that you can, if you can prove hardship, you could get
Now.
eviction on hold for up to a year. And there are various things of hardship. I mean, one of them is, like, a lot of times if we do those hardship things, you know, like someone's getting cancer treatment and they can't move now, they're going to they're in stage 4 cancer, they're getting chemo, they can barely even stay awake, you know? But we also have people, it's March, there's 3 kids in the school system. Can you just let them stay till the end of the school year? The key to that is though, you have to be able, the judge can order that the rent has to be paid along with that stay, which makes sense.
Right.
There's also, if you get evicted for breaching your lease, you get a 30-day period to cure that now under that same law. So say you got evicted because you had a dog and the lease says no pets. You can have 30 days to get rid of the dog and go back into court and say, it's cured now. And it's supposed to, that should,
So they don't
dismissed.
call that the 10-day notice to cure anymore.
well, no, that's beforehand.
Oh, beforehand.
Beforehand, they have to give you.
They gotta give you
security in
10-day
certain
notice to
circumstances.
cure.
But
Then
this
if
is
you
like,
don't,
this is after you lose. If
Yeah.
you lose, instead of getting evicted right away, you can cure it if it's a breach of the lease. I think as long as it's not like an objectionable tenancy, if
Right.
it, you know, like if there are. Yeah, like there's.
illegal stuff going.
Yeah, drug dealing, guns, that kind of stuff, I think it's hard to say I cured it, that's more difficult. But like pets or like you were smoking in your unit, and we have a lot of cases come in where
My
where
God.
people don't understand, they think because pot's legal that you can smoke pot. But anywhere, and if it's not, if your lease says you can't, or if you're in federally subsidized housing, pot's still illegal federally.
Yeah.
You can't do it, but you think that's something that you could cure? You could bring in a witness and say, you know, within 30 days later and say, yeah, I've been over there every day and he doesn't smoke inside anymore. And that's cigarettes, pot, whatever. So there is that thing. Again, though, you know, the laws are only as good as really not just the judges that will enforce them, but also people calling someone like us or knowing from forums like this, which is great that you have. Because you can't raise an issue or make an argument if you don't even know that you have that right, so.
Got a couple of questions, regarding, security refunds. Do landlords have to provide interest on security?
If actually, the interest requirement is required if the owner has 6 units or more. Is that correct, Bob?
I think that's right, it is.
Yeah, 6
And
units.
I don't handle security deposits in my
Yeah.
unit, that goes to the advice people, but do you get interest on it if it's a month? I thought you only had to pay interest if it was more than a month's rent, but that might not be right.
Well, the way the law is written, it's 6 units or more, and the owner can retain 1% for administrative fees.
Okay,
That's the way it, so with interest rates what they've been, if the owner takes 1%, you're in the hole.
right,
You know,
yeah, it's really nothing, right?
You know, so, yeah, so that's, with the security interest, but it is still advised that it be kept separately, from the owner's personal
Yeah,
deposit.
Right, they're supposed to keep it in a separate account.
Separate account.
yeah, can occur that.
Interest is 6 units or more, I think.
And then. Since with these new 2019 laws, how to stretch out the process of evicting somebody. Can landlords get a refund through their insurance company for that loss of funds through the court process?
The rent, are you talking about the rent?
Yeah,
Yeah, no, that would be. So give me an example.
well, he just said, you know, they can apply for a hardship for a year. So does that mean they're not paying rent for that year while they're waiting that out?
I think they have to, I think as long as landlord argue that the judgment order that they read would have to be paid during that period.
Or put in escrow.
Right, well, I think that has to be paid because you can't just say, oh, you're gonna let them stay till the end of the school year, and sorry about your rent, landlord, it doesn't work that way, it has to be
Okay.
part of it. Again, I don't know how a judge would handle it if a landlord didn't have a lawyer and didn't realize that, to make that argument.
But
So I don't know.
if someone were getting evicted for not paying their rent and then they go to court and they say, well, I have this disability, I'm getting cancer treatment, I need a year.
But again,
They're
there's
still
a
not paying rent.
part of that law that says that you can get a stay, you know, a hold on the eviction after a year. It has a component to it that you have to pay, you have to,
Okay.
that part of that order has to be that the rent has to be paid. And I think if it wasn't, then I think the stay would be lifted and they'd get thrown out.
Okay.
Is there any insurance coverage that will allow for a loss of non-payment of rent?
Or loss of rent just because you're vacant, you can't fill the apartment.
No, because there's gotta be a trigger on your, on a peril that you're insured by.
Mhm.
So, you know, the only thing is if you could say that they vandalized the apartment in some way, which we've got. You know, we've seen that where they take,
Yeah, for sure.
they leave and yank all the copper out when copper being what it is, and, you know, that can get a little bit,
course. That's not legal aid clients that do that, that's other people.
So do you guys have any questions in the audience that you want to ask any of the panelists?
I do. I just wanted to know, like, what are the systems in place for people going through stuff in real time, in real life? Like, I don't wanna speak on too much, cause I am going through an active case right now, which I've been fighting on myself for 2 years. And I know how to work the court system with a OSC and like a stay in place and those things, but I'm like, for people like me that's been living here, it hasn't been any help on the back end, and like, especially if it's administration problem, that's the cause of like eviction and things like that. Which my case is in an appeal because of an administration issue, and I just have no overseer over that site to say, to hold people accountable like the landlords and what they're doing to people on the back end. And then as far as like looking for other places, again, I think with this application fee, how can that be waived for people like me that's been looking for places and like paying $35, sometimes I see $20, sometimes I see $25. And then how far the landlord can go with like questioning you about your personal life, and do you have a man and boyfriend? You know, it's just things that I have been running into with a lot of that in Hudson, so.
What do you mean application fee for?
For like renting apartments and
I don't think
things.
it's more than 25,
Huh?
right, Jeff?
I think it's $20.
Yeah.
I think that's what the police was
Yeah.
$20.
Landlord's asking for $35 and like more.
People break the law all the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it was part of that New York State law in 2019 that was
Yeah.
passed at $20 was the
Yeah,
maximum.
it's 20.
So you could try informing them. I know it's still
Yeah,
not
see,
fun
like,
to
go see
pay.
on Zillow, you'll see a 30 or 35, like
yeah.
one person so far I saw it say $20.
Yeah.
With Zillow, if you are gonna be looking for an apartment, it's best to just pay Zillow that fee and it waives all the other application fees that are attached to that.
For 30 days, right, or at least?
I think it's more than 30 days.
Is it?
but,
Okay, yeah, cause I
it's
keep going, like, then now they're
Yeah.
asking me again after I did it a month before, and I'm just like, you know, so.
You might wanna hit that support button for that.
Now, I'm sure legal could probably help you with this one more, but I believe there are protected classes, where the landlord shouldn't be able to ask you about your familial status. If
Marital
you've got a
status.
man or not, your race, your religion, your,
disability.
sex,
It's
age.
been happening,
anything like
it's
that.
been happening.
Well,
I'm not the only
Then you
one.
should be calling the lawyer, because that's discrimination.
Yeah.
Well, or division of human rights, the only problem is that a lot of these times when you file a complaint with government agencies like that, it takes
That's
a
right.
long time. It takes a long time to resolve it.
It's like the insurance department, if there's a problem with the claim, and people say, well, I'm gonna put the DFS on, or say, well. You know, go ahead, but it's gonna take a year,
See you in a while,
right? It's just,
I know, I'm like, what do I have to walk in these places with a body cam and start recording everybody, cause it's like,
Yeah.
it's getting that way, you know, and I'm just like.
But
ridiculous.
you have to report it, you can't, you know.
Maybe just mention, I think you just violated my rights by asking me about my
Yeah.
familial status, and
Yeah.
then you got that apartment, I think.
Mhm.
But what were you were saying something about there was administrative or administration, I'm not
administrative.
sure what that means.
Like if the house is like under low income and, you know, there's an oversight that sees that program under that house, but. I reached out to them people about the administration problem, according to the landlord, but they didn't do their job. And just no help. I've just been fighting the court system on my own since then.
You mean there's an issue with when you say administration, you mean like the property manager?
No, I'm
Or the
talking about
landlord?
paperwork, like recertification, things like that.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Section 8 or stuff.
Yeah,
Right,
for that
yeah,
section.
for subsidized stuff.
Yes, yeah.
Right, cause every year you gotta be certified.
Yeah.
The apartment.
Is this something I think that the housing advisory board might be able to help with, like? I don't know how much detail you can give or are willing, or maybe we can sidebar after the fact to talk about it.
I reached out to everything about it, legal aid, everyone. I guess they were saying that it was too late because it was an appeal, but I was trying to find like the oversight of the apartment. They did connect me to the right people, but it's still no help. They just like keep bringing you around. I'm just like, somebody.
Like
has to-
property management?
Yeah,
I think that's the property managers, owners hide behind the. property
Yeah.
Managers. a
It's
lot.
probably, it is probably, I think, as,
Yeah,
code enforcement officer Fox said, it is a violation of certain things like familiar status and that type of thing. Certain questions shouldn't be asked like that. And now, Human Rights Division of New York State, they have a number to call right up in Albany. You can probably talk to them. Have you
fuck
called them?
everybody. It's under investigation for whoever, but it's been going on for
You
nobody.
have a case number assigned?
I have everything, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
good, yeah. Is there an attorney working on it for you?
No attorney, it's an appeal right now. I knew how to just work the courts. I got my OSC, which
Is that
gave
like,
me a stay to
is that in
stay.
civil court or?
It's in the higher
Supreme
court,
Court?
yeah, the
Supreme
higher
Court.
court, yeah, now.
And if you feel you're being discriminated against, you should be contacting the Department of Housing and Urban Development.
I
But
think I'm distracted. I'm gonna check again, but I'm pretty sure.
When you file a HUD complaint, they kick it over to DHR, which is
Yeah.
actually probably better because I think HUD is. Well, it's a federal agency.
HUD usually.
And it's
turns
getting,
over
you
to-
know, federal government.
Whatever the renewal program is, that's just what they're underneath, the home renewal,
HCR, that's HCR.
Right, I contacted them too and nothing. Because I know
My
they're underneath the
experience-
program.
But DHR is a different,
Yeah.
human rights is different than the DH.
My
Okay.
experience is that any HUD complaint usually winds up with the Human Rights Division state, New York State, right?
Yeah, that's what they do. They usually kick it over, which is better. I mean, I'd rather work
Yeah, I
New York State than the federal government.
Well, I can tell you one case that's been going on with human rights and Dominic is familiar with that probably since 2021.
Yeah, it takes a long time.
2021, yeah. It does take a long time. And I'm sure that they're short of attorneys and the number of complaints that they have.
That's it.
If you don't mind, I'd like to get into the self-help situation, and I'm sure Bob knows what I mean by self-help, but I still get calls where people are locked out of their apartments because of non-payment of rent or,
Have them call us. I mean, that's, well, have them call the
I
police
call the
first. That's a misdemeanor now.
911.
It's a misdemeanor now, but they still, a lot of them still say it's a civil matter. It's like, wait a minute.
Yeah,
The eighties are over. It's not a civil matter. It's a misdemeanor.
that's right.
And, they should do something about it, but you should also tell them to call us because we could, in some circumstances, jump into court to get an order to require the landlord to let him back in.
So believe it or not, I get calls, like that, where, you know, services have been shut off. Power, you know,
You got-
continued, that kind of thing,
Have them
lockout.
call Bill, refer to our office because that's something that we would do something about.
Yeah.
I mean, that's serious stuff.
Well, I do refer them a lot of times to you, but my first words to them is call 911 and get the law over there. you know,
Yes,
because
definitely. That's what we would do
Maybe
too.
the
That's the first thing we do.
non-emergency line.
They're not, yeah. Hey.
Have you said,
And it sounds like something good, they use the term self-help, but what that means is that the landlord is circumventing the law, the real property action proceeding law, to get the person out, to coerce them into vacating by themselves without going through due process, so
Right, without going. through
that's
court.
what that is.
It's faster and cheaper and illegal.
How about, they got something now they call, cash for keys too, keys for cash.
Yeah, that's usually at the tail end of foreclosures.
Yeah, right.
Those
That's
are
a little
beneficial
different
protected a
story,
lot
yeah.
of times,
Um,
because banks want you to leave, but. You know, banks have lots of money, and so, you know, we've had clients who, well, you know, they don't wanna go through the eviction process and go through, because after a foreclosure, there's notices and there's rights and stuff. Sometimes they'll say, well, we'll give your client $5,000 if they're out in 30 days, and we're like, sold. If the client wants to do it, so, yeah, the cash for keys is a good thing, can be.
Yeah, I had somebody.
The other thing I'd like to bring up is the right to privacy and the right for the tenant to have what's called quiet enjoyment. I get calls frequently about landlords wanting to go into an apartment for an inspection or for whatever other case. Sometimes the reasons don't make sense to me, but actually, the landlord has to give you reasonable notice before that landlord can enter your apartment. That is your apartment, you are entitled to quiet enjoyment, and the landlord can't just go in at any time he wants to. I also find it with realtors. Realtors who want to show the property. They will tell the tenant, oh, you gotta be there at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. No way, no way, that's not the way it works. But you'd be surprised, I've had, not a lot of them, but I've had calls over a while that realtors kind of pull this kind of stuff too. And a landlord or an owner can't go in the property just without your permission, your apartment without your permission, unless it's an emergency. If there's some kind of a plumbing or electrical situation, and I'm sure.
Yeah,
Nick
pipe
knows
burst
about
in the
that.
winter or something like that, yeah. they can
Yeah,
go
you
to-
can only go in an emergency situation without often they'll go in and they'll take, not the, if going in on emergency, but in other cases, I've had people say where they've come in and take pictures of my bed unmade, my dirty dishes, because they don't get reasonable notice. I mean, if we all have that problem, but if we get reasonable notice, we make sure that the dishes are done, our bed is made when they come in. And you'd be surprised the number of calls you get on the right of privacy, and then reasonable accommodation and reasonable modification. I think Dominic can probably talk about that better than I can. But reasonable accommodation, if you have some kind of a disability, you're entitled to enjoy your apartment just like everybody else. So if something is needed by you that doesn't create a big financial hardship, maybe a slight change in policy or something like that, the landlord should be obligated to give you some kind of a reasonable accommodation. Reasonable modification is different. That can be a tub cut because you can't get into your tub or something. It can be widening of a doorway to get a wheelchair through, those kind of things. Lowering a cabinet or sink so that you can really enjoy your apartment, but reasonable modifications have to be paid for by so there's no reason or very little reason if a tenant says, I need a reasonable modification and I'm willing to pay for it, that the landlord shouldn't have any problem with that.
If I could jump in on that too, that's
Yeah,
that's another huge issue with any policy of insurance. Is ordinance of law coverage. So, I mean, every building on Warren Street is in violation of ordinance of law, any old city. Size of doors, size of openings to bathrooms, can you get a wheelchair in? Are the windows up to R values, doors? And unfortunately, if you don't have ordinance of law coverage in your policy of insurance, all they're gonna pay is what it costs to replace what's there. And we all know with the cost of windows today, you can incur another 20, 30, 40% in ordinance of law coverage, because you're widening doors, you're structurally changing the
Everything, I mean, the cost of windows, doors, insulation, just to bring
insulation.
these old buildings up to modern code, you're gonna spend a lot of money.
Yeah.
So get some extra coverage. I'm not a salesperson, but
No, it's just,
The cost of everything, even with the cost of blank, it's really everything's
It's an
Well, right, I
adversarial,
mean, as these code changes and everything, that you also have to spend more money just to get things up to the recent code.
exactly.
And if it's historic, it's another.
Oh, yeah, then you
Yep.
got a whole nother set of hoops to jump through.
And that's a whole nother issue
Yep. You're gonna,
with insurance.
yep, you're gonna have to pick the right contractors, have the right trim, all kinds of stuff, which is gonna cost, that price just doubled even more.
And let's not
So
forget
let's quadruple that insurance premium,
the
right?
horsehair plaster, you know,
Check
like,
later.
buy me a horse and shit.
In fact, an example at all for
Yes.
good cause eviction.
What do you mean example?
Like how, cause I've been searching and it hasn't been used in Hudson, so I'm trying to figure out when people call, what advice. For the process, cause it doesn't seem like, I can't find a case where it's been used in the cities.
Yeah, I don't know if it has it. Well, I mean, the example is someone, the landlord. Decides that they want to evict somebody for no reason at all, just. I don't know, they pissed him off one day or something. Yeah,
Yeah, but-
give us 30-day notice, then they file an eviction and you go into court. And you should be able to win by saying they don't have, they have to show good cause, they have to have a reason. It can't just be that they decided they didn't want me to rent anymore, or the lease. A lot of times what happens is the lease expires and. They want to get another tenant in there that can pay a higher rent.
Right.
And so they want to kick out the person that's there, they can't do that
But
unless they've got. Good cause, and in a city that has opted into the state good cause protections.
If the
Like
house
this one.
sells and the new landlord. Evict,
I think the new landlord is subject to whatever situation the prior landlord had. In other words, if there's a lease that expires in December, the new owner is. Subject to that lease, now that, there's always could be negotiations and they could buy the tenant out or something like that, but. A new landlord takes subject to whatever situation is there when they. Buy the place, so that, obviously, if you're buying a house, it behooves you to find out if there's anybody living there, if there's a tenant living there or not. And the realtor thing you talked about, Bill, we get some of that sometimes, and we have to, call realtors and they back off, and there's a sense of entitlement there. I don't mean to impute, sorry, I don't mean to impute realtors. I'm sure there's a lot of great ones out there. And this doesn't happen all the time, it's occasionally, but they think that they're entitled, hey, we're gonna sell this house and we're entitled to go in there and check. It's like when somebody lives there, it's a different ballgame. You're not really necessarily entitled to do that without, like you said, proper notice and things.
But Bob,
did you have a question?
Someone from the
That was
bottom.
my question, what was your advice or what was the recourse for a tenant that has an aggressive realtor coming through? But you said to have them call you guys so that you can intervene on their behalf?
It depends on the context, I think, depending, usually it comes up with us with somebody we've already got like an existing case and the landlord is trying to evict them. If somebody calls up. Just because of the realtor and there's no eviction going on, they probably would get advice about what to do, which, I've advised people many times. There's no law that says you have to answer your door. There's no law that says you have to answer your phone. So if a realtor comes to your door and you don't wanna let him in, then guess what? Don't let him in. So what are they gonna do?
So a new buyer is expected to uphold a lease from the previous landlord, so if someone were to sign a lease right before a house sold, the new buyer is expected to. Uphold that for that whole year?
They take subject to.
What if the new owner was planning on moving into the property themselves? Does that change that?
I don't think it does. But I think oftentimes I think what happens is there's negotiations that happen. And if, you wanna have the place bad enough, then you pay the tenant to move. Or, give them a certain amount of time and work something out. But yeah, like I said, if you're buying a house, you should know whether someone lives there or not. And if the tenant there, it complicates things.
and if it falls under good cause eviction, they're 65, then that's even complicates it more, right? Because if it's eligible for good cause eviction, and they're 65, that's even harder according to the law to have that person leave, right?
I'm just sure you mean 65 years old?
Yeah.
I don't know anything about that, and I have to admit, I did not have the time to look up. City of Hudson's good cause ordinance, I don't know specifically much about Now, I know about the state law, you know, that people opt into, but there's certain requirements that cities can. The parts of it that they can opt into, like what the definition of a small landlord is.
Right.
The small landlords are exempted from it, but like in Albany, a small landlord is somebody who owns one property, so basically it's everybody.
That's just
Other
big-
places,
That's just one.
yeah, well, and some of them they do, you know, they really want to get at the big landlord, so they say you have to, if you have 10 or less, you're not subject to the law, but if you have 10 or more, you are, so that varies. I don't know anything about good cause to the age of the tenant, that's a new one for me.
No, according, good cause eviction.
You know what,
It's, if you property's eligible and there's a senior citizen living there at 65, it's hard to get rid of that person, especially even if you want to sell the property.
That's news to me.
You know, it's sure I read it. But,
I
yeah,
know that there is a
so
specific,
my fear is because of discrimination, right?
there's a law in New York that does put some restrictions on. The ability to evict seniors, but I don't know, in my understanding that, I don't know anything that ties that to the good cause. That's a statute that's been around a while. Good cause is a kind of a new separate thing.
Right.
I'm not aware of anything, but I mean, there's a lot of stuff I don't know. But I don't know anything about, yeah, I mean,
Just don't admit it.
I don't say it in court, right, but I don't know. Actually, I'm a supervisor, I don't go to court on my own that much, really, I help other people.
seniors are protected if they are moving from, if they have a lease and they no longer can take care of themselves and they need a caregiver, or they have to go into an assisted living facility or something like that, that they can get out of the lease.
Right, yeah, it's a similar provision to in a domestic violence situation where they can have an early termination of the lease if there's a domestic violence
You know
situation. But I don't, if it's tied to good cause, I mean, if you've got someone that, I should give you my card, you can email it to me because I would like to be educated on that.
Well, same thing, you know, if a property is eligible for good cause, my understanding is once your lease runs out and if the landlord wants to increase the rent. And if that property, they have to tell you, and it don't even go so high. And they have to tell you what they're spending.
5%.
Right, and well, unless there's work to be done or whatever, right?
Right, yeah, there are exceptions.
But they have to write that into the reasoning. So that's why I'm wondering, you know, my thing is, you don't know if your property is eligible. Unfortunately, I think unless you go to the eviction process. Because a lot of people don't know if their property are living in City Hudson. If you don't have, you know, the exemptions, right, Section 8, you know, whatever the tax, you don't know until you go to the eviction process.
Well, and that's kind of true. There is part of the good cause law is that whenever there's a new lease. They have to attach a notice about whether you're subject to the good cause law. If you get any legal notice at all, could be a termination notice for 30, 60, 90 days, a rent demand for 14 days, any of that stuff. And the court papers themselves all have to have a notice attached that the landlord's supposed to fill out that says that does good cause apply? And if they say no, then they have to, there's a whole list of reasons that they have to check.
Right.
We get cases dismissed because they don't do it, because it's new and people forget or they don't know. So that's part of it. So you do, I mean, theoretically, you know, if that notice is attached to the notice that you get, you know, you're right, the eviction process, but before you get to court, if you read what you're serving, that should be attached. And if you get, I think it's when you sign a new lease, they have to attach it as well. For the exact reason you're talking about, so people know whether good cause applies to them.
Has to be at the really.
Yes, you gotta put that.
Because a lot of these people that are buying property are not from the city of Hudson and they have no clue what the laws are. No.
A lot of them probably don't
whatsoever.
A lot of them know the laws, but they think you don't know.
Is that good cause law that is just Hudson or is that Columbia County?
No, you have to opt into it.
It's the city of Hudson and Catskill, Village of Catskill down here.
Okay.
They fight for the whole county.
One other thing I'd like to bring up, because I get this question a lot, is the roommate law. The roommate law specifically says it's New York real property law, and what it says is that you can have, if I'm leasing a property and I want to bring in my immediate family, and not just my immediate family, but maybe one adult into my apartment, that the owner or the landlord cannot object to that as long as it is. However, and I'll talk, I want to make a little caveat on that too, but you can have your immediate family, and by immediate, I think they get into grandparents and, brother-in-law, maybe brother-in-laws, sister-in-laws, they get involved with a lot of that, which may be legal. But then you can have, but you have to notify the landlord within 30 days of the names of the people that you have brought into your apartment. But like a public housing and senior housing, public housing is primarily income eligibility driven. Senior housing is more age oriented. They are exempt from that type of thing, so, and I think Trish could
Subsidized
probably
housing.
talk about that.
Yeah, I'm sure about that.
Subsidized housing there's huge regulations because you have to go through background checks and things like that, and it's based on income. If there's income from that other member of the household, but the HUD also has regulations as to how many bodies would be in a room or a sleeping area. So if you're only in a one-bedroom house and you already have two adults, let's say their spouse,
Mhm.
they can share that bedroom. The living room could be used as a sleeping area, but you can't add another adult or let's say even a child because it becomes overcrowded. And you have too many people living in a space and it goes against their housing limits.
I'm not sure, but I think there is a rule of thumb, one person per 80 square feet. Is,
Just found that.
one, is that, have you heard that? One person per 80 square feet?
I don't know how that
Because
fits
it's
the
New
HUD
York State
regulations,
law.
but
It's because certain parts of New York State law supersede federal, and that's one of them.
But
Right before I left.
I get that
I
question
got that.
on the roommate law quite a bit. The thing, as I said, is that the important thing is that you don't overcrowd. And the next thing is that you advise the landlord within 30 days of that person coming in, the name of that person, so to speak. Do you know, Nick, of any overcrowding rules in Hudson?
No, but I think, what she was talking about, if you're in HUD or Section 8 housing, those rules, because they're federal, they're gonna supersede any state laws. that They might refer to.
I think that's unclear. Actually. It would make sense because the supremacy clause, federal laws, and the supreme law of the land, but years ago, I pulled off of a listserv, somebody who sent a list of cases in New York that said that the roommate law, superseded it, which my mind was blown. I didn't think that would make any sense. Especially in subsidized housing, but I think some of it might depend on if that person has income, because as you said, if there's income, then it's income based.
Mhm.
But if you have somebody who comes in and there's under the roommate law and they don't have any income, especially if it's like a child or something, I'm not sure. I think it's up in the air.
Well, there's
Is there
certainly
some
occupancy loads based on
18-year-old
square feet in a residential home, but I don't know how that would pertain. To how many people are sleeping and staying in the house, just how many people are allowed to be in a certain area at once. From my standpoint.
Yeah, I know one township years ago, I don't know if it still exists, but it was unrelated occupants. They brought that into question because these people were not actually family. And it constituted more than one adult, but I do get questions on that, so I just thought I'd bring that up.
Bill, you got about 15 minutes, just wanna give you the time warning, if you have any closing things you wanna check with.
Did you have anything else that you were wanting to say, Dominic, because I think you were starting to, or did you get it all out?
I probably forgot, thanks.
I understand.
Were there any Zoom questions tonight?
No,
Gotcha. Are the people on Zoom?
there are two people on Zoom.
Okay.
Maybe if we have 15 minutes, I can bring one more item up to.
Well, hold on, one thing I'll say is that when I've done presentations about things that include the roommate law, it just blows people's minds, because, you know, landlords get upset about that, because if you have more people come in, you know, there's more possibility the property could be damaged, there's more utility usage, which costs more,
Water
it's in the landlord's name, water, electricity, everything. And it just, people cannot believe it, that roommate law, I'm glad you brought it up, because it's not very well known. When I say it, people question me I'm like, I'm not making it up, I'll give you the site, you can look it up yourself, but it really is a mind blower for a lot of people, because.
But you'd be
it's
surprised the
pretty-
number of questions
Well, yeah, it's kind of complicated, because it's a certain number, and it's only certain people, and I don't know about the 30 days to tell the landlord,
Yeah, you have
that's,
to tell.
that's new to me, I don't know where, I'm not.
Within.
I don't deal with roommate law every day though, but I've never heard the 30 days thing, that's new to me, I didn't hear that.
Bob, I did one question just because it came up a couple months ago. So there's somebody that purchased a trailer in their trailer park. And owns it and then paid the lot rent and the security. Before the lease ran out on the lot rent, they were hit with I think another $75 because the security deposit went up, even though they paid at the time the amount, but that year it went up, so they were told that if the security deposit goes up, you have to pay it, even though they own
The
it.
rent goes up,
The rent,
the security deposit goes up.
Right,
Yeah.
but so they have to pay the extra security deposit.
I think there's a,
I would tell somebody not to pay it, because you can't be evicted for not
Yeah,
paying the security.
yeah.
deposit.
Yeah.
So I would just tell them, yeah, that's important, yeah. Go away, there's a game on, leave me alone.
I do believe too that the mobile or the manufactured housing laws,
They
they,
can make their own laws and all.
Well, you have a different statute.
Yeah. what they can't do, they can't raise the rent more than 3% in New York State in a mobile home park, the lot rent. If they raise it more than 3%, they can't raise it more than up to 6%. But if they raise it up to 6%, they have to tell the occupants in the park all the good things that they're going to do to improve the park. So it's 3% maximum. I was talking to somebody today, by the way, pays $500 a month park rent. Their rent went up to $515, and that is 3% of the 500. So apparently this park owner knew that, but I've had park owners where they'll list a whole lot of things that they're going to do to raise it up to the 6%, and those things don't ever get done. So but going back to Dominic, I think there's something also in the rules that apply that you can't do that. You can't ask them to increase the security deposit unless they've lived there more than 5 years, I think. I'd have to check that out, but I know there is something in the law that says you can't increase the security deposit, and it's for that, over that, I think it's quite a long period of time.
But the deposit can't be more than the monthly rent, it used to, the people who charge, I think they still do sometimes.
per
You
second.
know, like first, last, all that stuff, it's supposed to be one month's rent, and that's it.
So does that fall for regular rentals too, that if that rent goes up,
And
then
I can check that out.
you can get your security, even though you paid your $1,500 when you first moved in, every time your rent goes up, they could charge you for your security.
Yeah.
I've just heard that before.
Specifically-
All right, I just checked.
I don't know if you can do that, and again, you know, they can come and say, hey, your rent went up 300, we're on 300 security, and you can say, well, that's interesting, go away.
Yeah.
What are they gonna do?
Yeah, yeah.
I guess they could sue you in small claims court for $300 security, but I've never heard of that being increased like that, that's a.
Yeah,
That's a new one for me,
Yeah.
but I know that they can't evict you for not paying the security. Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
And you
You know,
can't be
I've seen
evicted.
that where, you know, somebody allowed somebody to move into the apartment. because the tenant said, I'll pay the security once I get into the apartment, they didn't. So then they were evicted for not paying security.
You can't be evicted for not paying anything except rent.
All right, here we go.
Can't be late fees.
Open
I'm like,
AI.
I've got Google right here. and
Chat GPT it over here.
Yes, a landlord can often increase the security deposit to match the rent increase during a lease renewal,
Oh, trust you.
but it depends on local laws. If a security deposit is legally limited to 1 month's rent, example, in New York, California, the landlord can usually request the difference at renewal to keep the deposit in line with the new higher rent.
Should we check the mobile home?
Maybe we should check Google too, and then Claude.
Find it out.
Check the mobile home law on the road.
All right, yes, deposit.
New York State.
I think this means we're wrapping it up, right, guys?
Yeah, we're into open AI.
Yeah, are there any more questions? I mean, anybody wanna know anything?
One other thing I'd like to say, and then I'll cut it off, but reasonable accommodations and reasonable modifications apply to even single-family dwellings that are being rented and so forth. A lot of that, oftentimes owner-occupied, single-family owner-occupied rental property is exempt from certain fair housing laws. That is one of the laws that they are not exempt from. So they would have to also make a reasonable modification or accommodation if warranted. That,
No, you cannot increase a mobile home. There you go.
okay,
Security
does it
deposit.
say over a period of time though?
No, it says, hang on.
You guys should just put this AI up on the screen.
Mobile
Panel in half.
home protection, specific cases in some areas such as New York. Laws prohibit landlords from increasing the security deposit after a tenant has lived in the manufactured home community for 5 years, even if the rent is increased.
Oh, so it's
So
down.
after 5 years.
After 5 years.
Okay.
There you go.
She's got the
Oh,
right
thank
idea.
you all.
There you go.
Thanks for
Snagging a piece of
coming.
pie.
Time for a
Listen up,
slice.
guys, before you leave, there's probably a lot of pizza left there. Please help yourself to pizza, water. And if you want to take it with you, take it with you.
Thank you guys so much for being part of our panel, for our attorney and our new. Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming.
And take some of that swag. I don't have to bring anything home.
Oh.
Thanks for checking that.